People across America are still being targeted, harassed, and fired from work because they are LGBTQ. Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin, and sex has long been understood to cover sexual orientation and gender identity. That wasn't until recently. The current administration has been throwing this into question. So what are your rights and what protections are there in Ohio? Hi, I'm attorney Doug Mann, and I'm a managing partner with Dyer, Garofalo, Mann & Schultz. Our law firm practices in Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio. We support PFLAG, the Dayton Pride Parade, and we work hard to promote inclusivity in our firm. Sadly, the number one concern we see from LGBTQ clients is discrimination in the workplace. As a lawyer and as a father of a gay son, I believe that we could be doing so much better for our community in Ohio. Ohio still has a long way to go in protecting the employment rights of both gender identity and sexual orientation. Only half of all LGBTQ identifying individuals are protected from employment discrimination at the state level. Only 21 states, the District of Columbia, Guam, and Puerto Rico have state statutes protecting both gender identity and sexual orientation. 7 states, including Ohio, have protections based on that 1964 Civil Rights Act. We have no protection for LGBTQ at the federal level. That's a big deal. With recent questions being posed on whether sex should still cover gender identity and sexual orientation, Ohio could be in a lot of trouble. What we really need is a favorable United States Supreme Court decision. Having a Supreme Court decision on the issue would finally give the LGBT community equal rights to employment across the nation. It would remove the immediate risk of losing protections in your state or your city after every election. And it will give the LGBTQ community a national right to legal counsel when they've been wronged in an employment situation. So what are your employment rights in Ohio? There are 2 types of employees, public and private. Public employees across the country are protected by Obama's Executive Order 13672 that prohibited discrimination in the civilian federal workforce on the basis of gender identity and in hiring by federal contractors on the basis of both sexual orientation and gender identity. Private employees must rely on laws passed by the state or local government. In Ohio, these laws change sporadically depending on which city you're in. Right now, there are only 27 cities and 1 county in Ohio that have local laws protecting employment. There are 100 cities in Ohio. That means only 27% of the cities in Ohio are protected from workplace discrimination, harassment, and firing based on their sexual orientation, and 26% from discrimination based on gender identity. We still have a long way to go to fully protect the LGBTQ community, and a negative decision by the Supreme Court of the United States could squash the rights of a massive portion of the state. It's important to know which cities have your rights covered. They are Akron, Athens, Beechwood, Bexley, Bowling Green, Canton, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, Columbus, Coshocton, Dayton, East Cleveland, Kent, Lakewood, Medina, Newark, Olmsted Falls, Oxford, Sandusky, Shaker Heights, South Euclid, Springfield, Toledo, Worthington, Yellow Springs, Youngstown, and Cuyahoga County. What can you do when your rights are violated? If you've been discriminated against at work, you have options, but you also need to collect the evidence. When someone mistreats you based on your sexual orientation or gender identity, document the encounter. Write it all down so that when you take your case to your employer or a lawyer, you have something solid to present and you can remember all the details of the encounter for a later date. Be sure to include the date, time, location, who caused the incident, and what they said or did. Keep a list of witnesses to the behavior, and if you can record or photograph any incidents, that would be very helpful. Ohio is a one-party consent state, which means that if at least one party consents to a conversation being recorded, it is legal to record and use as evidence. Make sure to also keep hold of any company procedures or policies that were not followed in your case. When reaching out to your company about the problem, make sure that all correspondence are kept in email or recorded for evidence that you made an attempt to prevent the behavior. Discrimination can sometimes be so subtle at a job, you may have a hard time identifying if it's happening to you. If you feel that you've been treated differently than your cisgendered coworkers, make note of the behavior. Do you see other LGBTQ individuals in your workplace experiencing similar interactions? Have you been treated differently if you've come out or been outed at work? How did your company find out that you were LGBTQ? Some companies may deny knowing your status to excuse their ill behavior. Sometimes these situations can escalate into a wrongful termination. So what happens if you're fired for being LGBTQ? Unfortunately, Ohio is an at-will employment state. This means that a company can fire you for any reason, provided it is not discriminatory, and that can be a challenge to prove sometimes. Keeping a record of the discriminatory behavior before the firing can, as we mentioned before, make your case. Having physical evidence is essential to proving wrongful termination. Here are a few things that may improve your case if you're wrongfully fired. Ask your employer to put the reason you were fired in writing. Keep or obtain records of your employment, especially any records of your reviews or evaluations. If you have a union, report your termination. Send a professional, formal letter of complaint to your HR department, especially if you have an equal opportunity employment officer or ombudsman. Transgender rights in the workplace can also be a source of concern in the LGBTQ community. Factors like restroom policy and dress code can make a workplace discriminatory and often extremely uncomfortable for trans individuals. Restrooms should be accessible for all employees, but many transgender people are alienated from that right. OSHA prohibits employers from making an unreasonable restriction on an employee's access to restrooms and will give you a stronger argument when discussing access with your HR department. However, most courts have upheld an employer's right to dress codes. You can make an argument for dressing as the gender you identify as, but the company may still attempt to override you, and this doesn't leave room for those that are non-binary. A great source, if it is available to you, is to work with your union. Unions can be a good option if you can't get through to your employer or HR department. If a union will not hear you, you have legal resources even in states without protections. For example, if a union hall will not give a worker a task because he is gay, the worker would be able to file a discrimination complaint or a grievance under the procedures outlined in the collective bargaining agreement, or they may sue in court claiming breach of the union's duty of fair representation. A union can help you enact change in your company. They can help you work to create non-discriminatory clauses, workplace diversity programs, and even diversity training in your workplace. One right that you have, if you require it, that's legal counsel. Finding a lawyer that is working in your best interest is extremely important when you begin this process. Most lawyers offer free consultations, so you can sit down with that firm and really figure out if that's the lawyer you want to represent you. Some questions to keep in mind when meeting with a potential lawyer: does the firm have the experience with employment cases involving sexual orientation or gender identity? Does the attorney have doubts about the rights of LGBTQ people? Does the attorney know the kinds of arguments that can be used against you in court? Firms like Dyer, Garofalo, Mann & Schultz that protect the rights of LGBTQ people exist across the state, and many work with Equality Ohio's legal network. If you are in need of help with your legal case, you can always reach out to either my firm or Equality Ohio for resources and legal help.